Hey, Brian.
Hey, Diab, how's it keep letting people in? At the moment, we do have a quorum with Heather Hannon, uh, Heather Von Mering, and Diab Jarius. I'm sure Maureen will be coming around any minute. And I see John Serbier, Hank Lynn, John Stevens, and Jamie Duvall. So welcome to the rest of you.
Hi, this is Heather Von Mering. I'm chair of the planning board. For everyone who's on the Zoom meeting with us, thank you for joining us. Just so you know, you are being recorded. WinCam does record our meetings for to be displayed um, on their channel. In addition, with that, the planning board typically does not use videos. We use Brian shares his screen so we can see all the documents that we are talking about in live time. We find that's most effective. And so we've been doing that. Today is Tuesday, May 19th. The meeting is called to order at 7:34. And we have a quorum with Heather Hannon, Diab Jarius, and as Brian said, Maureen Meister will be joining us shortly. On our agenda today, we have some updates we're going to quickly go through. At 7:35, we have our public hearing for the Springtown meeting articles. At 8:25, we'll be going through the A&R subdivision filing fees to review the fees that currently are in place and if they need to be modified to meet the actual costs to administer those applications. At 8:45, we'll be talking about 910 Main Street. There's an application for demolition of that historical building. 9:05 p.m., we'll be going through the CBD developments. As some of you may remember in our last meeting, as some of you attended, we reviewed two sites with a development team for the Fells Hardware site and also the Converse Place in the Center Business District. And the planning board said that we would come back as a board to discuss it, to really come through direction and a consensus of where we stand on those two projects. At 9:50, we're going to go through our meeting minutes that we currently have, and 9:55 we'll go through new business, and hopefully if we stay on time, we'll adjourn by 10 p.m. this evening. To kick it off, Brian, you want to kick off with all the updates that you have?
Sure. Let me stop that. So one big update was that the Governor Baker outlined a four-phase reopening for the state. This was the first that so some people think that municipalities get a lot of heads up before the governor speaks, but we are looking at it at the same time that everybody else. You can see that some of the things from that are outdoor activities with beaches and parks are going to be opening with restrictions. Really, everyone, if for the entire phase, where you have to go to mass.gov/reopening, and that kind of outlines what the four phases are. The only thing we know about the timing of these four phases is that each of them would last 3 weeks, but it's unclear how long this first phase we're in is going to last, meaning it could last 3 weeks, it could last 3 months. Something to do with offices is that one of the guidelines is going to be a 25% occupancy rate opening for offices on May 25th, but really it's going to be very limited in-person service to the public in all town buildings. You're going to have to wear a face covering. They're talking about temperature checks coming into the building. So most face-to-face contact in the town hall will be limited to the maximum extent possible. Anyone who can work from home is supposed to work from home during this phase one. Some other notes such as bathrooms and stuff are going to be for employees only within reason. Obviously, for emergencies, we're not going to do that. This Thursday, the select board has to vote of whether they're going to have a remote town meeting on June 8th. There's still legislation that's happening right now on whether or not remote town meetings will happen or be allowed to happen. The town is prepared to go to court in order to make that happen. Final votes for FinCom are on the budget will also be on Thursday. So there's going to be a little more clarity with our budget as well as the town's budget after Thursday. Those are all the main updates that I have in relation to into town hall and the state in general.
Thank you, Brian. Maureen has joined us, just so everyone knows that. So let's move on to our public hearing. And for the planning board, if there are things, more updates that you want to go through, let's do it at the back side of our meeting this evening, so we can proceed on schedule with the public hearings for the Springtown meeting articles. Just so everyone knows, I do not anticipate that the board will be voting this evening on the on the articles. I believe that we'll do that on May 26th or shortly before town meeting. So to begin, do we want to start with the citizens petition?
That is up to you. I'm going to unmute John Stevens. John, are you ready? I'm going to share my screen and put up the zoning bylaw to the pages that you I believe you said it was 7-3 that you wanted to start. Is that correct?
I believe it's 7-5.
7-5. Okay, I'm gonna open that up, and then you will have 10 minutes to speak, and then
I trust I won't need 10, Brian.
Okay, let me just get this up for you, and we will start. All right, John, the floor is yours. It is 7:40. You can just instruct me on how you'd like me to go through the zoning bylaw. We are in section 7.3.10, establishment of center business districts and areas, and begin whenever you're ready, John.
Thank you, Brian. The reason for highlighting section 7.3.10, at least from my end of things, is that it describes the areas at 7.3.10.2, which is pretty much in the middle of the screen. You'll see the first area described as East Core, and Brian, if you would shift to the next page, please. The next page shows us 2, Town Common, then 3, the North Core, and 4, the museum. This is the section that establishes the boundary lines, which we can see on the very next page, please, Brian. And there all the areas are, excuse me, laid out. I wanted to then move on briefly to 7, 8, 7, 9, and 7, 10. This is, and we can stop there if you would please, Brian. 7.3.11.3 is a table of CBD use regulations, and that goes on for, well, quite a ways, at least 2 more pages. And we can just please scroll through those, Brian. And I think there's one more, a little bit on the next one. Yeah. Finally, we're to dimensional requirements at 7.3.12. You will see that the East Core is the first, Town Common is next. Then we, on the next page, please, Brian, we get to 12.3, the North Core, and also the museum area. Last but not least is the map showing heights. And we can see that the Town Common is 40 feet of right and 60 feet with a special permit. The North Core is 45 feet with 65 feet with a special permit. The museum district, I confess, all I know is that it's at 38 feet. I'm not sure what the special permit there will permit. My concern is that the areas outlined here, particularly the Town Common, the North Core, and the East Core, is that they all have residential areas which are adjacent to the area planned for, what should we say, development. And in particular, the area on Church Street in the Town Common has commercial buildings mostly to the east side and commercial buildings on the west side, but immediately on the other side of those commercial buildings in the Town Common area is a residential neighborhood. And I guess for that reason, the heights were limited to 40 feet. If we then move over to the North Core, we'll note that along Main Street, everything to the east side is commercial. I guess there's a little bit of the museum that hangs over, but for the most part, almost entirely east side is shown to be, is known to be, I'm sorry, it doesn't show on the map necessarily, but the east side is all commercial. On the west side of Main Street, there's also commercial development, but behind that commercial development to the west is a reasonably large residential area. And in fact, I think that residential area is greater in size than the area adjacent to the Town Common and larger than the area in the East Core, which is residential. My concern is that there's no particular reason to differentiate between the Town Common and the North Core, particularly given the proximity of the residential areas in both situations. One of the other questions or suggestions I would say that I have is that as one goes to the stoplight at Stop and Shop and then continues continues then to up to Swanton Street, that there are commercial buildings on both sides. Again, this is not shown on the map, and I've certainly not asked Brian to put up a map. They're commercial. We know there are commercial buildings on both sides of Main Street, but there are no residential areas immediately on the other side of those commercial buildings. So it would seem to me that that portion of Main Street is quite appropriate for commercial development, but less, but much, I won't say much, but more so than either the North Core or the Town Common, which again have immediately adjacent residential areas. My impression, and if I'm wrong, someone please correct me. Main Street, North Main, as it heads north from Swanton Street, um, I guess provided for some commercial construction near, well, I'm not sure where it was exactly, to be honest, but I understand there was then an amendment to the zoning article, the zoning bylaw, to change that zoning to preserve more of the residential character of that particular neighborhood. And that's essentially what I'm asking for in this case. Or what I should say the petitioners are asking for in this case. I'm not sure that the developer was talking specifically, the developer of 654 Main and 10 Converse was addressing specifically the fact that I'm seeking to amend, or the petitioners are seeking to amend the bylaw. He commented that 92% of, in fact, he's commented several times that 92% of the voters at town meeting approved the bylaw as it was passed in 2016. Again, I believe there have been at least 2 amendments to the zoning bylaw since then. Nothing, I guess, is permanent, and nothing is perfectly designed, I would say. That's what I have to say. And finally, I would just say, I think the North Core should have the same height limit that the Town Common does, if not, frankly, what the Museum District has. But the petition asks specifically that we simply move the west side of the North Core into the Town Common area, whatever one wants to call it, or simply divide the area so that the east side continues with the 45-foot limit and the west side is limited to 40 feet. Thank you very much.
So typically at this point, John, we open it up and we allow questions from those who are here. Would you like to do that?
Surely, I'm here to answer questions. I hope I can handle them.
Are there any, so when we go, usually when we go and open it up to questions, if you would like to unmute yourself, there's not too many people here for the hearing, well, for the meeting in general. So if you just want to unmute yourself and say your name, address, where you live, and your question, that'd be great. And please direct it directly to me, and then we'll deliver it over to Mr. Stevens. So if anyone has any questions, please feel free to unmute yourself and state your name and address. It seems like there aren't any questions. Are there any members of the planning board who have any questions for Mr. Stevens?
I'm going to unmute everybody just to make sure there's not any technical difficulties. So I'm going to unmute everybody, and we'll see if anyone would like to make a comment. If you could just say your name and then I'll get you in the queue. I'm going to unmute everybody right now.
Thank you.
Okay, everybody's unmuted. If anyone would like to talk, please say your name now.
Yeah, I'll say something. I tried unmuting my speaker thing, and I guess it didn't work. I'm Jamie Duvall, and I don't really have a question. I just wanted to speak in support of this citizens petition, because it makes all the sense in the world in terms of, yeah, that part of Main Street it's a commercial corridor, but right in back of it is a substantial and somewhat dense neighborhood of detached houses. So if I need to ask a question, I could ask why it was zoned at 45, but I definitely support John and the petitioner's thoughts. Thank you.
Anybody else would like to make a comment before either I or a planning board member could answer that question, and then we would have planning. Any other residents or otherwise on the call that would like to speak to the article?
Brian, this is John Serbier. I have a comment. I don't have a question.
Okay, please proceed.
Okay. My name is John Serbier. I'm chair of the Housing Partnership Board. We have just started to look at this citizen petition article, and so let me provide some initial feedback that I'm getting from some of the members. The effect of lowering the allowed building height will be to kind of increase construction costs and the cost per residential unit, resulting in higher rents, higher purchase price. The objective of the planning board, of really everyone in town, has been to provide a diversity of housing choice. This change would make that accomplishing that objective harder. So that's one comment. Second, even though the CBD zoning has been in place for a while, we are just now seeing the beginning of applications for development in the North Core, in the Town Common area, and in the CBD. It certainly is appropriate to periodically evaluate the zoning, but I think it's premature at this point. We need to have more experience with what's actually being proposed on that. So I would, my recommendation would be to wait. The third comment is that the CBD zoning was very carefully developed over a period of time. The planning board took the lead, working with a diverse range of organizations and interests and citizens and residents. And there was great care given into defining both the North Core, the Town Common area, and in looking for areas that the type of buildings that could be accommodated in each of those areas, how it would interface with the residential cores. So one of the opinions that had been expressed by members of the Housing Partnership Board is that the planning board should be taking the initiative to amend the CBD. This should not come zoning. This should not come from a small one resident or a small number of residents located in one particular residential area that is just happens to be adjacent to a proposed housing development that's being built on the west side of Main Street. So those are my three comments. The Housing Partnership Board will continue to look at this, and we will take a position. I suspect that one suggestion that will be made is that this article be indefinitely postponed. That would give the opportunity for the planning board to get involved. That would also permit the focus of the June town meeting to remain on financial and budget issues. Thank you.
Can I respond just a bit?
Well, let's see if anyone else from who hasn't had a turn to speak.
Maureen's hand is raised, Brian.
I see that, but we're going to the planning board after.
Want to make sure that you know. So.
Sure. No, I'm looking at the participants. I just wanted to make sure that the residents are finish before we go to the planning board, and then, but it looks like Jamie might be the only one who wanted to respond. You've already had a chance, so Jamie,
Whoa,
if
whoa,
you
whoa.
could keep it under to 2 minutes, that would be great.
Do you want to start the video?
Thank you so much. Just real quick. I'm sorry, just real quick. I live right above the town common up on Dick's Terrace. In fact, I'm looking out right now onto the little green squares that would be 40 feet. So I understand completely why the neighbors that live behind Main Street on the west side would be concerned about the commercial development that backs right up to their neighborhood. On the other side of on the other side of Main Street, it's a really different animal because it backs up to the train tracks, and that could be 45. Plus, it's only a 5-foot difference, which seems so small. But I just wanted to point out the different nature of west side versus east side of that portion of Main Street, and that I completely empathize with the neighbors who are concerned about what's built below them. I would be too, and I think they do have a right to do the citizens petition. Thank you.
Thanks, Jamie. The last resident that would like to speak is Russell. Russell, could you please let us know your last name? I'm going to unmute you right now.
Yes, my last name is Gay, G-A-Y.
Okay.
This is just regarding the 910 Main Street.
Oh, we are not at that agenda item quite yet.
Okay, I'll just wait for that then.
Yep, sure. Anne Marie Bracco, please proceed.
Hi, Anne Marie Bracco, 23 Elmwood, Suite A. I would just, well, I appreciate all the work that John Stevens has done, and I also appreciate everything that's going on with the planning board and the housing authority. Is it authority here? I'm a newer resident to town, but one thing I did want to ask, when all this, the different types of commercial buildings were considered and the housing was considered, I wonder if there was ever a traffic study done, because I feel like the traffic on Main Street can definitely deal with these larger buildings, but Elmwood is a small street, and I also think Vine is as well. And I don't think these streets can handle the type of traffic that these large buildings, large residential buildings, are going to cause. So I really think that it's a good idea for this citizens petition to be considered, just because the volume of traffic on Elmwood, I don't think is being considered. If the traffic was going to be, you know, these buildings were outletting directly onto Main Street, and the construction vehicles could go there and all the trash pickup could take place there, I think it would work a lot better. But Elmwood is just too small a street, and I really would ask that a traffic study would be done as well before any permits are allowed. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, it looks like we're going to be going to the planning board comments. Maureen has her hand up. Maureen, please take it away. You got 5 minutes.
Can you hear me all?
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Barely.
Oh, is that, I'm pretty close. Is there something odd then? Am I coming in now?
I can hear you.
That's
fine now.
better. Thanks.
Well, okay.
Welcome, Betsy, by the way. So thank but we have all 5 members here this evening. So
Yep.
Sorry, just wanted to say that we all have all 5 members here. So thank you.
Start my time again. I don't
Of
expect
course,
it to take
of
5.
course, of course. I won't give you those 30 seconds. You start now. Whenever you're
Well,
ready,
anyway,
I'll start.
I just want to begin by saying when the dimensions were the last part of the whole process of figuring out what the planning board was going to present to the town meeting. And I still have a very vivid and unhappy memory of that experience. That discussion about what the dimensions would be by right with special permit, and there were some other variations, as you know, or as you can see on the map too. All of that was played out in one last meeting. As Dennis Carlone has pointed out, he was long gone from the picture. We were in the lower level of town hall. Jackie was on speaker phone from work. Art Krieger was there. We were at deadline. I wish I could tell you these dimensions were all worked out in fine detail and we were all on board with them. We were having votes every 3 minutes on all in favor of this, I, no, yes, whatever. And I can tell you now, I did not agree with the way that was zoned on the west side of that North Core. So to me, this is bringing back something that should have been dealt with, but it was in the end when it was unfortunate, but we've all felt respectful that we voted up, down, 3-2, whatever, but we just kept moving through to finish and get it to town meeting. When we got to town meeting, I was very positively impressed by when a former member of the planning board who was with us when we started, Lance Grensback, said, "It'll never be perfect. Let's pass it, let's approve it, and it can be amended." And and a lot of us felt that way, and the majority of people felt that way. It had been around for quite a while. There were a lot of other things that are in the zoning for the CBD that were really good, and it was time to move forward and just get it out there. So that's the first point. I don't want anybody to represent this was the final word, nor was it all as I wish I could tell you. It was all very carefully thought through and studied in every element, but it wasn't. Some of it was pushed at the very end because it was the most difficult. And these dimensions fall in that category. The second point is that since that time, we've brought on the units. They actually have come on that are over what I'll call the Brugger's bagel little development there. All those all those units are now are now sold. Furthermore, the Elmwood units are now coming on market. So the nature of the congestion of the parking, thank you, Brian, that's perfect, because the parking right around Elmwood is really crushing. And it's going to get more so once Elmwood's occupied. So considering the amount of greater density you get with this North Core zoning, it's really a problem. It's not even, I mean, it's not, even if you're not living there, it's an issue. So the east side of Main Street certainly can take greater density, greater height. I'm still comfortable with everything that's in North Core for that east side of North Main Street. But on that west side, it's a very different situation. And I think pulling it back to what's in the town common and in the East Core makes a lot more sense. And then finally, I just want to say, for me, it's not my neighborhood, but I worked really hard and I was really on board with rezoning for GBD 1, 2, and 3, and of how that rezoning took place for the North Main Street side streets, the residential streets. And I have a lot of respect for what happens to these side streets off the commercial corridors. And I think that we've got to consider the impacts on the people who are living off these side streets. I just don't think that no matter how you slice it, I can't imagine anybody could realistically argue that the east side of that North Core is the same as the west side of the North Core. I really think some differentiation is appropriate given what's there and the people who are living there. So those are my thoughts. Thank you very much.
Are there any other planning board members that would like an opportunity to speak to this article? Like Heather Von Mering, the chair, said, the planning board will not be taking a vote this evening on whether or not we would be endorsing this article or recommending this article. That will take place, it's not been finalized, but most likely will be next Tuesday, May 26th. Any other planning?
This is
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm happy to talk, but I would like to give the rest of the members a moment to speak before I go. So Heather, go ahead, please.
I just had a clarifying question. Are we only talking about the parcels between Vine and Elmwood, or all of the ones on that side of the street?
It is the entirety of the west side of this, according to the article that's put before us. It's the entirety of the west side of Main Street. So it would be everything that's west of Main that is blue would turn green because they would all be 40. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 parcels.
Dieb, did you have any comments or questions?
My only comment, and I think this is sort of referred to in Brian's memo to the board, is that in all of the residential neighbors across town, we allow a 45-foot height.
40.
I'm sorry?
40.
40. Oh, well then I am wrong.
40 is the by right height.
40 is the by right height.
Is the by right height for traditional single family duplexes. All the other residential zones, it's a by right height of 40 feet.
Okay, well, I just want to make sure that we extend the same courtesy to everyone across town if we were to reduce this. But since it's already at 40, then I'm a little disconcerted by Maureen's description of the process by which the CBD heights limits were put in place, in part because it calls into question the height limits everywhere in the CBD, and as to how we are going to look at them, since if there was not as much rhyme or reason to them as I'd hoped. So I am a little concerned about the shaky ground we stand on, but that's a separate issue. But I don't have anything further than sorry to take the time. Thanks.
Betsy, did you want to add anything?
Maureen had, well, I think Maureen had, as well, yeah, but I think they both had very good points.
Okay, thank you. So I'm gonna jump on where Dieb was going with that. So across town, the by right height is 40 feet, which is what all of our residential, all the residential housing across town is. That is equivalent to 2.5 stories. And by changing the 45 to 40, the by right then is 2.5 stories along Main Street. And the whole point and the big issue we have throughout town is where does the growth go? And when I was not on the planning board at the time that this was developed, but I was on the historical commission. And with that, the historical commission did walking tours with residents of town to talk about it. And I remember sitting there with Charles Seckers, whose seat I took, and he had done sections through this area and sections of the heights and what these dimensions actually mean in terms of stories. To go down to 2.5 stories in the North Core when you also have the floodplain as a issue, because that eats up some of the square footage, which you saw, and Dennis Carlone mentioned it in his memo to the board, is where my big concern is. So the 45 dealt with some of the flood issues. It also dealt with, that is a commercial corridor on Main Street. The one that specifically is causing some concerns is the proposal that is at the Fells Hardware site. However, that is a parcel that is a deep parcel. With all that, and you take all that into consideration, the slope between Main Street, the North Core, going up to Vine is also substantial. It is less substantial when you look at the heights of the town common area and the variation between the lots that are the residential to the commercial area. The slopes there are much less differentiated from each other. There is zoning written in there that when you're going up against residential, I remember because I specifically was one of the people who asked for it, that the design of those buildings take into consideration and degress in massing. I don't have actually the exact language, and to move towards the residential. I think overall, the whole town could be zoned at 40, and by right, and then go everything else with special permit. But I don't think that actually gets where we want it as a town as a whole, to where we wanted to go. And some of the beauty of the areas that are impacted are actually that they are being impacted by commercial, that they are in close proximity to the commercial center, and they are in walking distance to everything. And it's kind of a trade-off to all of it. When the question regarding the traffic, all of that with the special permit, if there's a concern for traffic, would be picked up in a review from an independent, and the traffic impacts has to be mitigated through the process. So I'm not as concerned about that. And that realistic numbers will be looked at for how much people are moving in. I know with the undeveloped site behind the liquor store, and that there are some issues going on there with a lack of sidewalks that can also be mitigated through the special permit process, and also working with the select board as those permits are being pulled to create that missing sidewalk that needs to be added in there for public safety. And so right now I am not sold that it is at this point the best thing. If the planning board wants to go look at, I think the bigger issue actually is the impact of the PUDs. So I know that a lot of the feedback with the PUDs is that is that they are too massive from some of the residents. That's worth taking a look at going forward to see if really that height and what they need to do to meet the PUDs, that is worth looking at. But the actual increasing the by right height for that section of Maine, I can't, I'm struggling with to grapple, because it just hinders the development. And we really do need quality development in town.
Well, it's right at around 5 minutes. Heather, I was just going
I'm
to
good.
answer one question and then give one clarification. There was one question about what was the rationale for any of this, not necessarily if the numbers are right or not, but the rationale was that the North Core was an area that had the least amount of historic resources and therefore could potentially have more height. That was, I'm not saying that 45 was definitely the right number. What I'm saying was the rationale. The other clarification I wanted to make was that it was insinuated that we had made changes to the center business district and that we rezoned parcels. That was actually in a different zone up the street. So this is Skilling's, not what we were doing was actually in the GBD 2 and 3, which is what we had done 2 town meetings ago. I just wanted to make the clarification that we haven't made changes, that was a different zone up Main Street further north, almost a mile. And that was all I had.
I'll just say that I'm also a little conflicted like Heather. I understand wanting the lower heights when the parcels are immediately adjacent to a single or a 2-family, but I'm not seeing it for all of the parcels on the west side where we might want to see more development. Those ones don't actually touch single families or 2 families.
So I'll speak again. I think the bigger issue is once you've got the 45 feet, you are getting you're able to get more building in there. And the more building means the more units. And despite this word mitigation, there's no mitigating. More units is more cars. And it's the parking. It's partly, I suppose, what you're seeing out your window, but it's not just that. It's also how much greater density is being thrown into this neighborhood. I don't know who's over there and how often you are, but I am over there sometimes, and it's wild. There's just too many people scrambling already for spaces that are not available, and I think we're creating this horror for future residents. So I think pulling back and doing the same. I mean, it's no different from the town common area. We're going to be developing the Waterfield block. Or lot. So I think that yeah, exactly. So it's, I just think if it's 40 feet plus what you can do with the special permit works for the town common area, and we're already looking at a project in the East Core, why not give these neighbors the same rights and controls the other parts of the CBD already have. I guess I'll just go back to, I don't know, it's sort of a buzzword, but equity or fairness to the rest of the residents up on the Vine Street, Wedge Pond neighborhood.
So can I chime in again?
Go ahead, Deb.
I'm part of the CBD rezoning, which I was not a part of, envisioned much larger numbers of residential units being built downtown. I believe we were looking at 200 units.
That's correct. That's correct.
And so my question is, and this is a question for the board going forward, is if we are starting to whittle down the size of units, we're never going to reach that 200. And so the question really becomes, where do we want to put those units? If we want to protect the core, which has the more historically important buildings, and we don't want to build up density there, then the only places we can put higher density are on the edges. The edges do, of course, start mingling with neighborhoods. So we need to put more units somewhere. And if we are really going to start saying we can't put this many units anywhere, then we're never going to reach our housing requirements, which I recall for the town to at least get into safe harbor is around 700 new units. So if we don't put it in the core, then we have to put it in the neighborhoods and the rest of town. So we've got to put them somewhere. And if we want to reopen the debate about which parts of town are going to get affected by this, if we want to reduce the density in the core, we have to increase the density elsewhere. So it doesn't matter where we put them, we're going to impact existing neighborhoods. We need to put them in areas where we impact the least number of people. And I'm not saying, I don't know the answer to this, but we are making choices about how we're going to impact neighbors by deciding where we can put more or less density. And I can understand why the 45 feet went into the North Core area. Heather Von Mering, her discussion about the gradient of the streets and such was actually kind of what I had in mind, but I didn't say anything. If we want to revisit this, we have to revisit increasing density across town in order to put in the extra units.
So I want to jump in because I think you've raised a couple of really good points, and I just want to make sure they're said. First of all, when you see the Dennis actually added it up, and we knew where he did it. It was a by the numbers thing. So he understood where the 200 units would go, and they were not really developed from that west side of the North Core. The greatest single number of units was going to go on the east side of the North Core. So I can't reconstruct I can't tabulate everything for you, but we don't have those in yet. But that's where he saw the greatest development. And they were fairly large, what you might call garden apartment style buildings around an open plaza. So that I wish I could give you the numbers, Deb, because they exist. And then, yeah, exactly. Thank you, Brian. And then after that, we do have this Waterfield block, and that's coming in. That will be, I mean, I'm not in the meetings, but there will be affordable housing. That's the goal. And then, of course, we are seeing some number. Right now, we've got very large luxury units coming in next to the Mill Pond building, and the entire first story is not occupied. So there's some, we have to get back, and we will be getting back to this that development. But that was another, and also Dennis envisioned it continuing across to the back of where the China Sky building is. So he was envisioning something larger in that PUD. But anyway, it did add up to 200 units. And I would say rezoning to 40 feet on the west side of the North Core does not in any way, shape, or form take away from this targeted number of 200 units. If anything, it looks like it will come in higher than 200 units once that east side of North Core gets developed, and I suspect it will get developed at a great density. So just on the numbers, I don't see any issue. regarding the 40B goal, I've given a lot of thought to that, and I love having this conversation because I've wanted to get this thought out there. The light bulb's gone on in my head. Both Lexington and Concord, and there's several other communities, have reached their 40B goal, and they have not done that in their centers. They've maintained their centers as these walkable pedestrian scale places. For better or worse, what we've got on River Street is the way that we're going to get to this 700 something, you tell me, Deb, number of affordable, designated state affordable units. So this is not going to happen in the onesies and twosies and maybe threesies that get thrown off the way we got, for example, on that new building on Elmwood where the units are now being sold. You're only going to get 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 units at a time on these 10% plus whatever percent, and so on. So to get to the 40B, we are going to need these more massive buildings, such as the one on Cambridge Street and the one on River Street.
Maureen, 2 of the sites are on the west side of the North Core that were targeted. Because I remember seeing Dennis's sketches. One was the Fells Hardware site, which we've been talking about with the development team, but the other one is the liquor store, which that also had units included in the count. And so you are impacting that count with that, because that was anticipated that would, as part of the rezoning, trigger growth there. We got the growth on the new development that's in Elmwood that's nearing completion. That was part of the anticipation as well for units. We got the units there. Bell's Hardware is coming in with their proposal, and then there's a liquor store. So those were part of that, and those are the 2 that are being impacted by the proposed zoning change. The other ones, we have a historical building next to the liquor store, which is one of the buildings in red, which is very difficult to demolish and rebuild there. You can add a story to it potentially. Then you have the Brugger's Bagel site, which just did an additional story, and condos. And then obviously you have the gas station. So the 2 most impacted potential sites are one that currently already has is in progress, and then you have the liquor store. So it really is only impacting two groupings of sites.
Yeah, I agree with you, Heather, by the way, just for the record.
And then it gets to a more technical thing, which the zoning is going to be frozen by those sites, because those owners have done that. And so even with going to town meeting with the change, their zoning as it currently sits with the A&R would freeze it. Is that correct, Brian?
Yes.
So at this point, it's for 2 sites. And so now I'm like, what I would really love to do is go back and take a review of the downtown, the center business district. Relook at the numbers, look at what is going on with the water and the counts, and look at the heights, and the new floodplains have been coming in since all the work the town has done, and see where those actual lines are, and do a full look at it. But with the time that we have between town meeting and now, I can't get that done to do it to a way where we could make recommendations. Also, I think it would be substantially changing the warrant article in some ways too, with what we would come up with. But it is worth looking at, and also looking at the PUD as well.
So Heather, John Stevens has his hand up, but I believe we've gone through everybody. If you wanted to recognize him,
Yeah, let's wrap up and we'll go on to the other article. John?
Madam Chair. The concerns that I have, I think, are that this neighborhood, the one that I'm in, is going to be devalued to some extent to serve the needs of the rest of the town. I find that I have to say disappointing. I will agree, Heather, that I think one needs to look at the PUD data as well, or the PUD permissions, because that's a large portion of, if I recall correctly, that would be a large portion of the North Core as it stands now.
Yes, but your article does not address the PUD. It only
You are
addresses,
quite correct.
yeah. And that led to my comment of, we can't change your warrant article or you can't make recommendations to add that in or address other things at this time. So
Understood.
that's where I was leading in my last comment. But thank you so much, John. We need to move on to the next warrant article that we need to discuss, which is our own.
Yep.
Brian?
Yep. Just give me a second. I'm going to get it out.
So everyone who's on this call, on the Zoom meeting, gets a little bit of backup information. Currently, the planning board has been in communication with FinCom, and they have slashed our budget and removed our professional services, which hopefully they will return, because that freezes the planning board from being able to actually do what we are elected to do. It actually makes us not able to do our job. So we're hoping they return that. With that also, town meeting has put a stopgap on some things up in North Main, closer to the Woburn line. And when they did that, they asked the planning board to look at, look at and analyze the full zoning of GBD 1, 2, and 3. And we said we would do that to town meeting, and we committed to that. However, that also costs money. So I'm going to have Brian go into Article 14, which is asking for money for the North Main Street study. At this point, the planning board hasn't decide if we're going to proceed or not with this, but as it is our article, we need to present it and go through the process until the planning board decides if we're going to go forward or not. We do look forward to your feedback. So take it away, Brian.
All right, I'm going to go through this rather quickly. It's in the warrant as Article 14, known as the North Main Street Study. The objectives of the study the objectives of the article would be to study the barriers to development along Main Street from Skillings Road to Woburn Town Line. That's the exact language that is in the beginning of the article. The goal really here is to respond to not only previous planning initiatives, but as well as town meetings requests to study this important area. The North Main Street area that I'm talking about, like I said, is from Skillings, which is here in my cursor, all the way up to the Woburn line here, which encompasses GBD 2 and GBD 3. The background here is from 1997. There was a study done known as the Triangle Master Plan that actually looks at this triangle here with my, if you can see here, it takes up this whole area that's looking up that triangle. And it said that in Main Street from Skillings to Woburn not only needs redesign, but also increased pedestrian infrastructure and possibly overhauling of the zoning. Then in 2018, at the fall town meeting, there was a request from the town meeting to, before any further zoning changes take place in the GBD 2 and 3, that this important area needs to be studied. In the school's master plan, they also noted that this area was an opportunity area for development and investment that would affect the schools, so that's why they cared about it. And then in our 2030 master plan, Main Street from Skillings to Woburn is an opportunity area for development and investment as well. The $30,000 appropriation that we're looking for is to study the barriers to development that exist. So this could be pedestrian and cycling safety, physical infrastructure, zoning, economic development, and traffic. These are all, that is all I have in relation to this article. If anyone has any questions, now would be the time to take that from the public. Doesn't look like anyone's raising their hands at the moment, so I will, just in case, I'm going to unmute everybody. And if anyone would like to speak to this, please just state your name. Would anybody like to speak to this article? Okay.
Just about the study?
Yep, just about this study. That's
Just what you just spoke? Okay. So currently the $30,000 for the appropriation has not been received, therefore it's not being used. My name is Russell, I'm speaking.
Yeah, so this is an appropriation at town meeting that we're requesting in order to do this study. The reason why we're moving forward is because there's uncertainty relation to the budget. So the budget will be voted on this Thursday, and based upon that budget, we may or may not move forward with this article.
And how does this affect future development in this triangle if this 30,000 appropriation has not been met nor used?
It's unclear. The idea was that there potentially could be zoning changes, there could be different design guidelines, there could be economic development initiatives in order to try to pump more money into this area. There's a number of things that could happen.
So with this funding, if anything, the end result would be a higher quality design study. Therefore, most likely resulting in a higher quality design reality in this triangle.
That is definitely what we are trying to
That's
do.
the idea?
That's the idea.
Yes,
Yeah, okay.
definitely.
Yeah.
Maureen.
So without that, you're
sorry.
more at risk for low quality, both on the
Well,
design and
until
reality.
exactly. I mean, because until we change, right now the zoning is what it is, and there's a
Right.
lot that's allowed by right, and there are no design guidelines in the GBD 2 and 3. I believe Maureen would probably want to speak to that. Maureen, why don't you go ahead?
Well, Brian, I had a handout that came in my packet, or it was a print in my packet of the PowerPoint, and it was indicating that there are two.
I'm so sorry. I clicked on on a PDF.
I'm smiling. You can't see me.
Oh,
'cause it's like,
geez. I'm so sorry, guys. I
And
missed
it
the last.
also
Nobody
plays
could see
into
me.
the response to what Russell's saying.
So
right.
sorry. I'm really sorry about that.
Right.
Here, so this should help out a little bit more. So I'll just continue on. Everything else previously was the same. This $30,000 appropriation. Phase 1 would be to study the barriers. Phase 2 at a later date would be a reformulation of the zoning and trying to take the best practices from the center business district and here it is, improve the quality of development in this area. So the idea of goals after phase 2 is to increase economic activity and investment and to keep the village character.
Mm-hmm.
That's nice.
Yeah.
So I'm really sorry I didn't have those last 3 slides, but here they are. So again, my apologies.
That's a lot.
And then Brian, could you just clarify, because we have a different amount of money we were requesting for consultants or basic, I don't know, consulting services. I don't know how you call it in town budget language.
Professional services.
And is that, as far as you know, still, has that been preserved?
So yeah, so I've gotten, we asked FinCom directly, do we still have the $35,000 for professional services? They have indicated that yes, they have kept that 35K in.
Good.
So that, I think the idea is that we don't really know what's going to happen at town meeting. Obviously that is a line item in the budget that totally could get thrown out during town meeting. So the idea is that this could potentially keep this ball rolling and try to do something in this area as early as next fiscal year.
But I think, if I may follow up, please, we do want to make it clear that the other money it really is a different animal. And just for basic functioning, for example, right now we've got a contract with Dennis Carlone. If there's a filing in the CBD, that money gets restored, but we need money just to function. And that's very different from this project on Main Street. So I think we'll want to be prepared to answer that question.
Agreed.
Yeah, this is Diab. Just to chime in to follow up on what Maureen is saying, because I think it might be confusing that there are now 30,000 and 35,000. Is that the planning board typically has its own budget for hiring people during the normal course of the year for reviewing various projects that come before the board and before the town. And that's what is the 35,000 consultant fees that Maureen was talking about, that Brian has indicated FinCom has still left us in the budget. So this 30,000 would be a special thing just for North Main Street, so it wouldn't eat into what the planning board normally does. Otherwise, we would, if we wanted to go forward with the North Main Street study, we would have to cannibalize the funds we already use in order to do studies for various projects around town, which we are loath to do.
I'm gonna also jump in. The other thing that's going on is all the departments, all the committees were asked to go to their pre-override budgets as if it didn't pass. So we were asked to completely strip all of our budgets. Because there was such an unknown with what's going on with the state's funding. The town was being told that the state is at a 20% deficit, which is going to go directly to our budget. Then now I think I read today that now there is a $2 million stipend that Winchester is eligible for Winchester. Each town is given a different allotted amount to help cover COVID expenses. So we might get reimbursement for $2 million. So the budget is constantly fluctuating right now, and it is unclear exactly where the town FinCom and the town manager are aiming. And they actually, every day it's changing what they're aiming for. And so we really, to do just a bare bones is actually would be the 35,000 plus the 30,000 to start on North Main. But given if the budget is completely sliced by 20%, it is not, we can't go for North Main at this time. If the budget is stabilized, then we can go for North Main. We don't have enough information to know what to go for, but we told town meeting we would. And it is something that was a high priority in the master plan of all the residents, not just the residents who live in that area of town. It was across the board. The businesses also were very interested in it for the economic development, along with just general residents wanted more economic development in that area. So it is a high priority. And we're just kind of sitting in a kind of a limbo waiting to see where everything falls. We asked FinCom to include this in our budget. They did not include it in our budget, so we came in with the warrant article for it, and we're kind of in a holding pattern. And it is a 2-phase. This is only the first phase of it, but it'll give us a lot more information and a lot more statistics so that we can make really good decisions on how to reformulate the zoning for the GBD 1, 2, and 3 to meet the residents' needs. And so that's when I started talking about, are we going forward or are we not? That's what we're trying. The budget is such in a place of every day we're getting different information coming in from the state. Different laws are being made every day from the state. So we're just kind of working with all case scenario, what we want, what can we do? And we already know that as of right now, the budget has taken away our part-time planner. So we're already losing staff. So that's where we currently are. And just for all the town meeting members who are on the Zoom meeting as well, so you are aware of what is coming down the pipe as well. So a little update if you haven't been seeing what's going on with the state level. So let's see, Maureen, you had something you wanted to say?
Yeah, I'm not sure when this fits in, but it does fit in. I would encourage Brian, like in the next week, just to speak with Ralph Wilmer from North Suburb, from MAPC, because there is some ability to work with Metropolitan Area Planning Council and to get some expert advice, more than expert advice, to get basically work with somebody there if they award us the the time really from one of their staffers to also work on Main Street. So I think sometimes the idea that if we can cobble something together is appealing to everybody. Anyway, I would just think that talking to them sooner rather than later could be useful.
I definitely think it's useful. We've definitely used DLTA funding. That's actually what kicked off our master plan. The only thing I can say is that in the past, and usually DLTA funding is a match. So we would,
could the sequence, could this go to the match?
well, meaning, yeah. So like we could give them 5 or 10,000, and then they would put in an additional 5 or 10,000 of time for a total of, I mean, but yes, typically DLTA, which is District Local Technical Assistance, DLTA funding is typically matched. So if we didn't have this, it's possible, if we didn't have this appropriation, it's possible we would have to use some of our professional services money. But I definitely will talk with Ralph this week.
That would be great.
Sure.
And then I think for the purpose of town meeting, if we understand that if we go for Delta, they sometimes call it Delta, don't they?
Yep.
Yeah. Money and whatever expertise that we need to have something to put out there. So it's
Right.
kind of, I don't know if you call it circular, but we really want to put all the pieces together.
No, it's a good thought, and I'll follow through with that. Is there, in the interest of time, is there anybody else that would like to speak to this article, whether it's on the board side or on the resident side? Could raise your hand click the button that says raise hand. Otherwise, I believe we should be closing the hearing.
All right, I'm going to close the hearing at 8:42 for the Springtown meeting articles for the planning board and the citizens. We're going to move onward briefly to speak about A&R subdivision filing fees. So the planning board, you all have the memo that Brian created regarding the summary.
Yeah, I'm just going to bring it up. Also, the engineer is on the line as well to talk about this. This was something that has come up due to several projects that have taken more time than we had anticipated. So there's generally about 4 people that work on these A&Rs and subdivision, 3 people in engineering and myself. Typically, we find the A&Rs to be anywhere between 5 to 6 hours of collective time between both of us, and we felt that $250, which is the minimum fee for an A&R, seemed reasonable for the amount of time put in. It's the subdivisions where there's really a very large just a discrepancy, or not discrepancy, but just a large difference between the easy ones and the hard ones. Luckily, we just went through Dunster, 36 Dunster / Lock Street, which I put as arguably one of the easiest subdivisions we have had. Not that it was easy, but the fact that it was, in terms of the complexity of it, it was really more of a road improvement plan with a house. That was about 70 collective hours, which included any number of things, in reviewing plans, meeting with applicants, site visits, phone calls, emails, planning board meetings. And then on the way other end of the spectrum would be Abbey Road. And without legal services, it really is, I mean, 700 is probably on the low end, and we think it actually could be even more than that. There were several processes that occurred. Like I said, it wasn't just a subdivision application. There was a development agreement. There was a lot of other pre-filings that really had nothing to do with this, but there was a lot of work that had to go to get into that. So I said, realistically, it seems like subdivisions within 5 to 10 houses could take somewhere between 1 to 200 hours. The current fee schedule that you can see below if there was an approved preliminary plan, you're looking at somewhere between $1,000 to $2,000. And then these each get added on based upon how much linear feet of roadway and the gradient percent and other environmental conditions. I think based upon these hours, one way that we could go about this is like actually taking the four of us collective pay and what we do and seeing a number on an hourly basis of how much money it's actually costing the town for us to review them. But that's all I really had for this. Is the idea is that we Beth and I came to kind of a rough estimate of time. If Beth wanted to add anything, I will unmute her as well. It looks like you're already unmuted. So Beth, if you wanted to add,
Yeah.
please go right ahead.
Yeah, no, I thank you, Brian. I completely agree with everything you said, just in the range of variability that can be between projects. I did think, though, that there was a state law that didn't allow us to recoup staff time from filing fees, because I know we went through this a few years ago when we were doing our street opening permits and grant location. So I just, I think we have to take a look at what's allowed under the law for the filing fees.
All right, so that's something that we can really, I guess we can look into. Maybe that's the next step, is that I talk with either assistant town manager or legal counsel in terms of what limitations we might have on filing fees.
Brian, you absolutely need to talk to council. And I would be interested in, I know, of course, council works with both Lexington and Concord, those come to mind, and a whole bunch of other towns.
Mm-hmm.
This is out of bounds. We cannot, the town should not be at the will of this kind of craziness.
Mm-hmm.
But it's council, it's not, it's legal.
Yep. So this was the, so there's really not so many decisions for this evening, but it's more of, this was kind of like, this was after a conversation that the four of us had, the four being Sean Broderick, Brian Kerrigan, Beth Rudolph, and myself. So these are the numbers. We can then translate that to see what we could potentially do with filing fees. So that's something that I can continue to work on with the team.
Brian, I've got a quick question.
Yes.
Under the fee schedule, approved preliminary plan still requires that the town employees work in order to get improved, it has to be worked upon. Geez. There's work done by the town before to get it to be pre-approved, right?
Correct.
So the $200 doesn't make any sense to me, because you're still doing the same amount of work.
Well, no, if there
I
was
think there's a separate number for preliminary filing, right?
Yeah, so if you look on the screen now, if there's no, so this is for a definitive subdivision. If there was a preliminary plan that's already been approved, there's already been a lot of work that's already been done, so it's just an additional 200. If there was no preliminary subdivision filed, then it's basically saying it's $300 more because that work hasn't been done yet.
Yeah,
and there's a whole separate fee schedule for preliminary plans, I think, right?
Yeah, I can get to that as well.
Yeah, that we need to see that as well, because that's part of the whole package.
I'm gonna jump in. So Maureen was talking about Lexington, just because our legal counsel also supports that town as well. But just for example, the 1 to 3 lots, less than 3 lots for a preliminary subdivision, they're at $1,000 plus $500 per lot.
It makes more sense.
So, and then if you have so they are well above what we are. We also have not updated it for a very long time. We are not even in the ballpark of where those around us are. So I get, we're not going to recollect the 700, but to really find the reasonable where you came in with the anywhere from 1 to 200 hours and figuring out what that is. And then obviously with each lot, there's an extra review because you're doing individual lots. So if you and Beth could sit down and come up with recommendations of what the administration fees are for those based on the hours that you've given. Those seem about right from my perspective. I don't know if the board wants to chime in and also speak to council as well, and come back. That would be excellent, because you guys know how it all balances out on your side, and what's the percentage of engineering, what's the percentage of Brian, and can work through that to give a really good, fair fee that really covers the cost. Deb and Maureen, go ahead.
My hand's up from before, but I just want to point out that if we pay town employees as much as I pay my mechanic, who makes $85 an hour, let's just say $50 an hour, 100 hours is already $5,000. So,
And that's why we need town council.
yeah, but I'm just saying, reason we need to charge a lot more. And I have a decent mechanic. He's actually really good. But
So this was the preliminary subdivision, but go ahead, Maureen. But this was the one when it went straight.
Well,
up
also,
preliminary.
has anybody seen what it costs to get a building permit these days? It's thousands of dollars. So we're just, I can't believe this. So for a subdivision, it's these, a few hundred times whatever, it's 1,000 or two. This is crazy. This is so out of whack, even within our own world of structure of what people are paying. So there's that. And then a separate point, which I hope you bring to council, and eventually maybe we should get in there with you, but I'd rather you, Beth, carry this to council. We need to figure out more variables here for figuring out how much money comes in, because clearly just the number of linear feet or the gradient of the road will not get us to the number of hours that these are costing us. So there are big questions about why did it take 700 hours to get that project done. Some of us can answer some of it, but not all of it. What might have been anticipated, or along the way, what can we do? The town can't, 700 hours times staff time, that just is huge. And we somehow, some way that has to be addressed.
Yes, it's certainly worthy of addressing, and we will continue to get actual numbers and see what we can do legally.
And Brian, it's the categories. I don't believe the categories. I don't think it's the right. I don't think that may be the way to go any longer. I don't know. Maybe it's maybe it's standard. I suppose it is, because I remember when we did this the first time. But we have to deal with the fact that we now will see only really challenging sites developed, and the number of lots isn't the point. It's how complicated the project is.
No doubt that these categories do not, they don't really take into consideration the complexity. So I don't know how we could, some of the categories can certainly stay, others could be expanded, but I think most of it is the intangible, if you want to know the truth. But we definitely need to be doing something about this. It was actually the conversation between engineering and I that we really realized that this is a problem.
Yeah, I agree. I think Lance and I put this together. I don't know, before there was a planner, so I don't know when the planning position was created, but it was a long time ago. So it's definitely time to revisit.
You were younger, Beth.
So
I was younger, yeah.
A dozen years. I believe it was 12
All right,
years.
we all were younger. I look forward to you guys on what you propose and what you recommend. Thank you so much for the update, Brian. And when you have more, let me know. We'll put it back on the agenda. Let's move on to 910 Main Street. To the planning board, my apologies, because I sent you an email right before the meeting because I realized it didn't go through. So Brian has it. He's going to pull it up. And it is a proposed letter that I wanted to review as a board. And if we want to make any changes, we can. So as all the board members, can you see either your email or we'll wait till Brian puts it on the screen, the letter.
Yeah, just give me a second. Sorry, I'm struggling. Okay.
And there was a resident who wanted to speak, but I don't think he's on anymore.
He is in relation to 910 Main Street.
Yeah.
Russell is still here. So
Oh, there he is. I see him.
he
Okay.
will be recognized when the board is done.
So I'm going to let for everyone who is on the Zoom who wants an update, 910 Main Street has been permit application for demolition has been filed. It sits with the Historical Commission. Currently, they are holding a review of any of those permits until after the pandemic is over, which is with the state changed the laws, which gives them right to do that. The planning board has been talking about this building for a very long time. We have all talked about how it's historical. And in response, in our last meeting, talked about writing a letter to the Historical Commission. However, I also think we should send it to the current owner as well. And in the current draft that I have, it does not include conversation about site plan or special permit and how historical resources are in there. So I wanted to see if you felt we should add that in as well. But please take a moment. We'll pause so everyone can read. Once again, I'm really sorry to the board that we have to do it this way, and I couldn't get it to you sooner. But we'll give you a few minutes, and when you're done, just chime in.
Right now, I'm seeing a screen which says Russell's iPad.
Oh,
I
that's
can see
odd.
Brian
I'm sharing a
might
screen.
have frozen. Deb, did you freeze?
Well,
it's showing that my screen is sharing and that the letter is up there.
Okay, well, I can speak with you guys, so I'm not totally frozen.
Deb, are you able to open your email to look at?
Yeah, I am. I want
Okay.
to make sure that everyone else is seeing it.
Oh, I've got it.
Okay.
It's all fine on my end.
Okay, well then.
Heather Hannon, are you able to see it?
I can see it, but Russell's iPad has been selected as if he's the speaker this whole time.
Interesting.
I don't know if it's a host thing.
Hold on. How about now?
It's still selected.
That's odd.
Oh,
Okay.
now you are.
Now you are. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry.
All right, so let's take a minute. Everyone can read it, and then we'll come back to talk. Maureen said she's ready. So Diab, Heather, and Betsy, when you're ready, just speak up.
I also spoke with the applicant today, so I was going to give that update once everyone's finished reading.
I'm done.
Are you just waiting for anyone else? Because I'm done.
Heather Hannon?
I said I was done.
Okay, Betsy?
Yep.
All right, we're ready to proceed. Comments, thoughts, additions, changes?
I think if you want to add something about site plan review and special, it's site plan review, I believe, for this project.
Correct.
Well, we don't know.
We have no clue what
So
what it is.
I think that's fine. If, let's see,
Well, if
share
we wanted-
information.
Yeah.
I think it would go somewhere in that 1, 2, 3, 4, the last full paragraph, because that's where we would we actually come in at that point.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody should try to write anything on the screen right now. It's too hard.
Yeah.
If Brian wants to just put
No.
site plan reviews, it
It's
definitely
fine.
would.
I can make the edit, and if the board gives me the right, I will just send it without the review. I just wanted to make sure before it goes out from the board. One, we didn't have a vote, so I can't send it from the full board yet. And we can't talk about it except in a meeting if we want to have the full board vote and have a vote on it, which I think is very powerful, and I would like someone on the board to do. But I'm happy to make the changes as long as the board is okay with me making those changes on their behalf and then submitting it on behalf of the full board.
Yeah, that's fine, Heather.
There's also,
Yep.
before we move, there's also a resident that lives very near to this area. I believe it's right next to it. Has his hand up.
Yeah,
if we
can
wanted to.
I just sneak in one comment?
Please.
I think it would, right at the bottom of that very last sentence, I think putting in a statement saying that we would love to work with the property owner to, move forward with their project, and, keeping, the words were in my head. Essentially saying that we want to work with them to come up with the best outcome, which includes the keeping retaining the historical structure, but using better language than that. I'm sorry, my brain's gone blank. But I think it's just, including that we really look forward to working with the developer to coming up with a good solution. That's all.
There's something confusing to me in the last sentence. I think I know what you mean. You mean that we include them in a meeting. Is that what you mean? That we meet with them?
Well, generally the process is that we work, I don't know if I want to say exactly in silos, but at this point, there's a demolition permit that's been filed, a request for demolition permit has been filed with the Historical Commission. And what we don't want is for them to go through a whole process that we're not involved with. Of course, they make recommendations to us, and in this case, we're making a recommendation to them, but we're also wanting to get ahead of it, because otherwise you end up with, in theory, you'd go for a full year clearing the site, waiting for a demo permit and then clearing the site, and then they need a site plan review anyway. So we want to work together at the same time. Plus, there's information that gets exchanged, and not everybody gets the same information. So the point is, if we're all together, we hear the same story at the same time.
I think that's helpful.
I just meant the wording. That I wasn't concerned about your explanation. It just says if we arrange a meeting with the owner and developer. Do you mean that we include them in meetings, or that we're all in a meeting? I don't know. There's just something about the wording that I thought was a little confusing.
You get rid of arrange if we meet.
Yeah.
Well, at this point, I think, it would be us going to a historical commission. Like they
Yeah.
have a
That's
permit.
right.
Yeah, they
Just
have
the way
a
we're
demo
going to
permit.
Conservation Commission.
Exactly. So they have a demo permit that's now they're going to be moving forward sometime in the next, let's say, 2 to 5 weeks, I would imagine.
Mhm.
And then they're going to go through the delay will be put on, and they're going to work with the developer to come to some type of an agreement, the way that that's how they work. So what we could do is pay attention to that and write memos to the Historical Commission and be a part of that conversation. At this point, that's all. We don't even know, like Maureen said, we don't know if they're doing a special permit. We don't know if they're doing site plan review. The only thing
So
we
one
can
thing
do is
that
be a
helps,
part of the
Brian,
conversation.
is because the Historical Commission's world is primarily, is it preferably preserved? Is it going to be on delay? They're dealing very narrowly with the historic building. But that means then it's over before, and then it shifts to the other, whereas meaning the site plan review, which site plan review is definitely going forward. So if there were new construction, so what we want to do is say, hey, look, to the developer, you might actually do better, because we're not going to be crazy about certain proposals you have for site plan review. So in the end, you may end up waiting a year and finding out you're not going to get some giant something, I don't know what, but let's put it this way, like the building that's gone up on North Main Street. We don't want to see another one of those, and we believe the zoning board isn't going to support another one of those. So if we all get together in the meeting at the same time, we might persuade the owner that they could work with this historic building in maybe some kind of an addition or some further development on the property to save the historic building. But we want to pull the pieces together.
Mhm.
I'm going to give the information. The site plan review is section 9.5.7, number 2, which is minimize any adverse effect on any historic resource.
Mhm.
And
Yep.
the special permit is 9.4.2, number 8, impacts on historic resources is defined in section 10 of this bylaw. Those are the two that specifically deal with historic resources, but obviously it'll also be the impact to the neighborhood character as well as other, those are the specific to historic, but there are like number 4 of 9.4.2, which is impacts on neighborhood character. Which
Do you think
really
it would make sense? Those are all good, Heather. Do you think it would make sense to say that if we can all, at some point, I guess the letter gets really long, but the idea is that if we can work with them now, that we're hoping to persuade the owner that it might be a better, even better for the owner to work with the historic building. Isn't
Yeah.
that the point?
The goal is really for them to
Yeah.
work with the historical building and include it in whatever development they're doing or expansion.
Correct.
Well, I believe that's obviously the historical commission's point of view as well.
I'm actually coming up with a couple sentences that maybe we could put in. And I've gotten through most of them. So what I have is the planning board is looking forward to working with the historical commission in its discussion with the developer to ensure that development on this site minimizes the impact on the resource and the neighborhood character. The planning board feels that retaining the historical building will enhance the development and will streamline the process.
I got this.
You
sure of that? Yep.
Through the town committees. That sounds really weird, but that's
I
what
think
I've
it's
got.
close enough. Maybe
No,
if
but
you would,
it's close enough because you could iron that out a little bit. You know.
Yeah, I will. Okay. I'll pass that along to Brian and Heather, and they can fold and mutilate it as necessary.
All right. So
Thank
No,
for,
you.
it sounded pretty good overall.
thanks, Betsy. For the overall, can we, are we ready to make a decision and so we can send it out, or do you want to come back and revisit it as a
no,
board?
send it.
So
I
just
move-
yeah, authorize Heather to send it.
And just to
Yeah.
make sure it's not only to the Winchester Historical Commission, but also to the applicant
And owner.
Yes.
and
yes.
owner. Okay, I'll make those changes. And Diab, if you could send your additions as well, it'll be.
Brian was going to tell us a little bit of an update on this.
Yeah. So I spoke to the applicant today and was looking to see what their intentions were. So
I'm sorry. Could you clarify applicant meaning the property owner or the developer?
Sure. So there's an applicant and there's an owner. Well, don't know who that was. There's an applicant and an owner. The owner has shown interest to deal with the applicant for various language barriers. So I talked with the applicant, and I have not talked with the owner yet, but I plan to. But the owner seems to want for people to be going through the applicant. The applicant is someone named Anthony Marino. He is involved with the other building on Main Street known as the Old Scruples building. I don't have that address off the top of my head. Maybe somebody knows it off the top of their head, but the Old Scruples building that is now it's kind of known to be an oversized building along Main Street. So Anthony Marino and his brother were involved with that site. Mr. Marino has said that he would like, his intention is to demolish the house and to put up, his preference would be all housing, but is open to a mixed use structure. And they're willing to work with the historical commission in every way possible to come to an agreed upon solution. That is all that they were willing to say to me.
Mhm.
That's 844 Main Street.
Thank you. So that was it there. It looks, I think there was a motion. I don't think there was actually a motion. Like, I think Diab might have motioned. There was no second and there was no vote to authorize Heather to finish and send this memo.
Okay, so
So
So moved.
Diab had the motion, and then
I
there
will
was
move that we give Heather Von Mering the authority to edit this letter as amended by the board and send it to the Historical Commission and the applicant and the owner of the property.
And this morning, I'll second that. And I believe they should be addressed because they have different names, and I don't know what address you're using, but you definitely should be sending copies to the owner, not just the person who's the
Of course.
developer.
Yep,
Yes.
of course.
Yes.
Right.
And you send those certified, or they just go by standard mail?
They can go by standard mail plus email, so that's easy enough.
Okay.
So that was the motion. I'll repeat it again.
No, it was a second. You got it.
Oh, okay. All right, second
Yeah.
by Meister then.
All right, I think we discussed it. All those in favor, can you please do a roll call vote?
Aye.
Aye.
Maureen, aye.
Diab, was that an aye?
There was an aye.
Heather Hannon?
Aye.
Betsy Krager?
Oh, aye.
Heather Von Mering, aye, 5-0.
5-0. All right.
I will include the vote also in the letter.
Great.
Wait, I have one quick question. I know we moved on, but it's not really clear in the letter that we're open to development on the site. It kind of just only says preserve the house. It doesn't say incorporate into a new development.
I think that's a good idea. So something about
Yeah, just
using
so
the
it's clear.
the house in new development.
You know, like, we're not saying we just want to see that house preserved. We're saying we want to work with you to incorporate it into a
Right.
Yeah,
New development.
the second sentence in my proposed language says the planning board feels that retaining the historical building will enhance the development.
Yeah,
Is
I
that-
felt Diab's quote that he was sending for us to incorporate and got that, but you're right. In the way that it's currently written, it didn't, but with Diab's addition, it does.
Good.
Well, the word
All right.
incorporate, maybe it's a good verb if you can use
Okay.
that.
Yeah, just to be
Okay.
clear that we are supporting development there.
Development in the area. All right.
Right.
Great.
Okay, let's stay on, we're a little bit behind schedule, but not too bad. So let's move on to the CBD developments. Who would like to start? I will start. So there's two sites. We probably should go one by one. Brian, are you able to pull up? Should we want to start with Converse?
Yeah, what would you like me to pull up?
Just the last presentation,
Sure.
just so if anyone we want to discuss or refer to something. So as a board, we all have different opinions and different preferences, and trying to balance those out is very difficult. And what we would like to see, what we wouldn't want to see. So I made a comment about the PUD and about that in the PUD, I personally expect, and by the zoning, that the affordable housing, to go to the PUD dimensions, you need to bring in more diverse housing. the the developer had said, well, we're doing 15%. My understanding of that 15% when I was that it was a 10 and 5. It was not a 15% affordable then plus the income threshold as well. It was the 10 and 5, which is the base of our special permit. Brian, is that correct?
Yes, the 15 that they've been quoting is what is required in terms of affordable, and that what the way that that works is, like you said, I'm just going to flush it out a little bit more. It's 10% of the units have to be deed restricted for people making 80% of the area median income and below, and then 5% of the units would be for 80 to 120. The caveat is that the units that are between 80 and 120 do not count on the subsidized housing index, but we collectively say that it's, you know, it's 10% affordable and then 5% middle income for a total of 15% deed. They still are deed restricted because we are restricting those deeds for the 80 to 120. But yes, that is they've been saying 15, and that is what is required to do anything. Forget special permit, forget anything. That is what's required.
Right.
So with that, that's where my comment was last week, is that if you're going to go for a PUD, which is above and beyond the special permit, you need to, and that the goal of the PUD is the diverse housing type, price point, sizes, that needs to be brought into the proposal. Then the other side of it was the discussion about the overall height. And I think I was misinterpreted in some ways, because I am not scared of height. I've said it before, but the entire building is height. The entire, the whole thing, it doesn't build up to the height. Setting it back a few feet doesn't build up. It's like in the examples that Dennis had done back, there was, you know, it started at the 3 stories and then the 6 feet was pushed way back. It was, you know, and what we're really getting is the whole thing is the height. And first of all, if you're going to go for that height that is allowed through the PUD, you got to bring it in the housing. And then you got to deal with not having the 100%, you know, everything maxing the whole site out. And, you know, it's having the entire cake. So that's kind of where I'm at with it. And, but I know the other thing that has, I have discussed with Brian is that if an application came through, they need a 4-0 vote of the board. And so the applicants really need to have a clear understanding of what each one of us is looking for. And that's kind of where I'm at right now on this site. And where I'm getting hung up. I feel that the actual ground level and the design up to that 4th floor is nice. After that, the top, it loses me in the character of its surrounding environment. Taking the materials, but the shapes and the forms are not there yet. I'm pretty sure I commented on that to them as well in my review. Who wants to go next? And we'll wrap around into, do we have a consensus somewhere in here of where to go with it after everyone speaks?
To go next.
Go ahead, Dieb.
So I looked at this from 2 different perspectives. One is, as you were talking about, what is it that gives you the right to go and get an approval by the PUD? I shouldn't say the right, but what are the special things you have to do your project in order to meet the requirements of the PUD? And because you can certainly get to higher FARs than the 1.5 through a variety of different ways. You get an open space permit. You can that gives you a higher height. You can reduce the number of parking lots or parking spaces, and that could bump your FAR up to 0.5. So there are a variety of ways of making the building bigger. But if you're going to go through a PUD, and the PUD specifically calls out diverse housing requirements, so we have here, just to read from section 739.2 of the regs, that if you have 6 or more units, you have 10% of, it's on page 728 according to mine, Brian. I'll wait till you get there. And the inclusionary housing part, which is 7319. Getting there. There we go. Okay, so if we look right at the upper third of the page, 73192, let's focus in on number 2. So if you have more than 25 units, you are required to have 10% of the units be affordable according to whatever 760 CMR 56 is, and 5% shall be affordable to 80 to 120%. So you can get that number of units without going to a PUD. So if you're going to go to a PUD, you really have to up your game in order to say, we deserve a PUD because we're going to do more than this 10 plus 5. And so where I'm coming at is from the inclusionary housing requirements on this project, I expect to see significantly more than just a 10 and a 5. I mean, that's what that number is. It depends upon the number of units that are going in here. But certainly if I were going for, shooting for the moon, it would be maybe 30%. If I'm not going for the moon, maybe 25%, but certainly much higher than just the bare minimum required, even if a non-PUD development. So when you're going for a PUD, you really have to meet those goals. So that was the first thing I looked at. The next thing I looked at was, what does it mean to have, how do we define massing and scale? And I think that in some ways, the CBD regs are they contradict each other. On the one hand, it says you need to keep in with the village scale of the center business district. And it talks about the East Core having a 2.5-story sort of skyline. We know that there are some buildings which could be built up higher because of their historical heights, but we're looking at 2.5 stories. Yet we have this option to go up to 58, 59 feet. And you can get that without a PUD if you use the open space height requirement. So I was looking at, and I say, well, let's say that we don't go with a PUD. What are the size? What is the footprint of a building that you can put in? And I just took the size of the lot, which is 25,902, and I did an FAR of 1.5, and I said, we're just going to have this building go right along Mount Vernon. Let's take the entire 100 feet on Mount Vernon. How big of a building do you get if you put in 4 stories? And these are 4 equal stories, and we know that the top story is supposed to be pulled back a bit. So because it's supposed to be stepped back, and if we do that, so this is just a minimum length. And if you step back the top stories, it's going to be longer. So if you put 4 stories for 1.5 FAR, it's a 97-foot length going down Converse Place. If you go to 3 stories, which is even lower, it's 130 feet. So that's still 130 feet by 100 foot would be allowed under current zoning. That's a big building, regardless of a PUD or not. If we went up to 2.5, and we can get to 2.5 by doing an open space, or we can do an FAR because of the parking. Let's say you get up to 2.5. A 4-story building gets you a minimum length along Converse of 162 feet. And if you go to 3 stories, it's 215 feet. And I should note that the length of the lot along Converse is 236 feet. So you're really maxing out that area already, even if you're doing it under just standard special permits. So one of the things that is confusing in this CBD is, what do we mean by scale of the building relative to the neighboring buildings, and what is allowed under just as without special permits, and with the special permits, and the couple of other open space things that get you extra benefits. And so we're all looking, regardless of how you look at the zoning, you're looking at a large building. There's no way around it. The question is, how do we limit this building, or how do we define the requirements on the volume or the mass of this building so it fits in with the neighboring areas? And because we are the SPGA, we do have to follow the zoning. And I think it's critical that when we say we don't like the size of this building, that it's based on what the zoning allows, as well as what the zoning wants to, what the result is that we want. And I think there's this tension there because of the way the CBD zoning is written. So if you're going to go to a PUD3, you really got to up your game on the inclusionary housing. I don't think it's where it needs to be if you're going to go for the 3.0 FAR. If you don't want to go that route and you just want to build a big building because that's what the number of units you get, you know, if you don't want to push to the PUD, we're still going to end up with a big building. There's no way around it. That's what the zoning allows. So you know, that's where how those are my feelings, and I don't know that I have come to a real decision, but those are my concerns, and I'm done.
So Diab, since you and I have talked, can we balance each other out for a second?
Yeah, sure.
Can you go to the elevation off of Mount Vernon? So from my perspective, when I look at this, if you're going to go for PUD, like the top needs to be dealt with, really. But if you're not going to go for a PUD, and I know it made them angry, is I was like, take the top floor off, take the green off, and you have a decent building right there, right? And that fits within, I believe, and I don't have the measurements and I don't have the calculations, but I believe that fits in site in special permit. So that's where I was coming, is go down to the 4 stories and last time and take the top off. If you're going to go for PUD and put the inclusionary, everything needs to be moved back, pushed back. And so you're building up to that height more.
Yeah, I can. Yeah, I
understand where I was at. Across the street, there's a perspective that they did, which was, or the section. It was actually the section at the end of the presentation.
Yeah, can we see those? That
that's and here's a section. So I was looking at it. You have the proposed building outlined in the bottom one, right? The proposed building with the pink one across the street behind it, which is next to the fire station, right? And if you took that top story off, you're kind of in scale with that. So that's another reason why I thought that's, you know, if you don't go for the PUD with the inclusionary housing, that's why I made that recommendation. I know it aggravated them, but that's kind of where I was at, and I felt that was more of a fitting for what the feedback everyone was providing.
Well, I think it's also important, as you pointed out, that there is also the reality that they need to get 4 votes on the board. And
yeah.
So, although there's, you know, and I think it's pretty obvious how, well, I don't know, I won't speak it, but you need 4 votes on the board. And I agree that the top is certainly, you know, I'm not as offended by the top of the top floor, but that's just, you know, those are aesthetics. The height thing is an issue, but it's again, we're going to end up with a big building there. Regardless, that's what the zoning allows.
Yep, absolutely.
And I think that when moving forward, as much as we may have wanted a smaller building, that's, anyway, I've said my piece. So, yeah.
Who wants to go next?
Oh, I did raise my hand, but
oh, sorry, I don't see the participant. I don't hear.
Yeah, I don't either.
Go ahead. I just for the
planning board, I figure you guys somebody notices.
I
anticipate you would be you would chime in when you're ready and be respectful of each other. So go ahead when it's just the 5 of us talking.
So I guess I'll take this from several perspectives. One is the feedback we've gotten, and as it happens, we've gotten a lot of feedback from professionals, meaning design professionals in this community, a lot, not like 1 or 2 or 3. and people who are in the industry, people who know what's realistic. And I'm hearing over and over 4 stories max, and that 4th story should have some, should set back in some level. So 3 in terms of the view from the street, if you're on Mount Vernon Street, and then it can, in the zoning and in the design guidelines, it slants. It's supposed to be going along the lines of the Brown and Stanton block and Locatelli, which I see to the far right, and so on, the town hall. So it's supposed to pitch back some kind of a mansard or pitch, and not this boxy setback that you see so much in much more commercial buildings. So anyway, I would say 3, what would be in plain English, old-fashioned 3.5 stories. That's the concept. Although that top story certainly can cover the better part of the footprint of the building, but setback and then with dormers. So the proponent has got this idea of penthouse, but that's not in the zoning. The zoning already anticipates these kind of sloped roofs as a part of the look of the town center. Well, if you're doing sloped roofs, you're not doing the big penthouse thing on the top story. So I think that, and I will point out over on Dick Street, the building next to the Congregational Church, it's a condo building, it has sloped roofs, and those are smaller units at the top story. So maybe it's floor 3 that's the highest price units in this building. Anyway, that's not my issue or topic, but that is maybe the reality here. So the other point, Brian, if you could go back to the ground floor, I'd like to go back to that.
The
Of the
floor plan?
proposed building, the ground floor plan, yeah.
Yep.
Right, thank you. I guess I never anticipated giving up the entire first floor to anything profitable for the developer. And it sounds like this restaurant thing is a giveaway. It's not that profitable. And we're wondering if that's an awfully large restaurant anyway. If we want some kind of food to activate the space, fine. It has been pointed out that it should be on the south side so it catches the sun, not up there in the north. But separate from that, this residential amenities. Now, one person who wrote to us is a realtor in town, bless her soul. I didn't even really process what all was going on in that space, but that's a giant space. Is that really just going to be exercise rooms where the shades are going to be drawn and people are in there in their spandex exercising? That just seems like a real shame to have this, as Diab said, very large building, and then to give that much space for something that was never really the objective for a large development in a PUD. So my conclusion is that this building should get, the massing should be pulled, or the height should be pulled down 3.5 stories, but that top story, that 4th floor should be, it can be a full foot that can cover the building. And then beyond that, the first floor needs to have some more productive use, not this residential amenities use. I just find that a terrible, it's a distressing even way to use the space. And that reminds me, Brian, did you forward all the letters that we've received, all of them, because we've gotten so many, to Dennis, so he's also in the loop?
Yes.
Okay, so all the letters are gone. Thank you.
Maureen, I also believe, and I have never been part of the conversations on what those, but in buildings that I work in, those residential amenities are the gym, but there's also social rooms,
Conference rooms.
social spaces in there as well. Sometimes there's entertainment in there. There's also going to be storage. There can be all sorts of other things. So it's undefined. But that is something that could go to the top as well if it was
exactly
stuff, and then that could be more activated with.
In fact, it would kind of make sense, because in a top floor where you've got the pitched roofs, those could be kind of pretty, and then you've got the views outside the town, and then down on the ground level you could have turn that over to places where people could have it's the Jane Jacobs things, eyes on the streets, and those lights go on at night and people are in the spaces, and at least it feels like it's used.
Yeah, kind of like Rose Wharf, actually. It's although I don't want to
My
relate it.
husband mentioned exactly that, Heather.
Yeah, at Rose Wharf. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Can I add a comment that I forgot to make, but ties in exactly with what was being spoken about right now?
Go ahead, DM.
And
We
that
gotta balance
is,
each other out before we add someone else in.
yeah. So we're talking about the first floor and whether it should be used as commercial or residential amenities. One of the things is that when the laundry building comes down, we are losing active commercial space there. We know that there are businesses in there. They came up and they said, hey, we've been told we're going to leave, or they're going to tear our building down. So we're losing commercial space there. Where is it? We don't want to lose those businesses. So one of the questions we've had is there room for commercial on the first floor of this building? And I don't know what the price per square foot will be, but certainly it would be great if the commercial space we're losing from the laundry building is made up for in this building. So that was
So
my
you're talking
own.
about small offices like we are losing dentist office or using a medical doctor's
Yeah,
office.
I don't know what the occupancy rate is in the laundry building right now. So I don't know how much active space we're losing, but we are losing at least the floor, I believe. So.
Okay.
I'll volunteer. They will not be comparable. The new space will be vastly more expensive.
Understood.
That's
Understood.
just reality.
So Maureen, you actually want not just one store, you want a store and a half off of it?
Oh, well, where we were before, I think you and I weren't that far apart. Bring it down to 4, but that 4th floor should have a slope, which is in the zoning, or in our, yeah, it's in the zone. I don't have my zoning bylaw with me. I mean, it's too far away. It's in the room, but anyway, that top floor is supposed to be sloped.
So you and I would differ because I actually love the mansard roofs. So.
Oh, no, that's okay. No, we don't differ. No, it's fine. I'd have to see it. Obviously, design is a lot.
Because from my perspective, mansard roofs are very productive in getting the square footage.
Yeah.
But then also getting really good light, and you can do the walk.
Well, let's talk about mansards. Some people would say the Brown and Stanton block has a mansard roof. The Locatelli block has a mansard roof. There are a lot of just the mansard's just not vertical.
Okay, so that is very clear. Thank you. Heather, did you want to chime in?
Yeah.
Add into the mix?
Yeah. So one thing you said, Heather, is similar. Like it isn't so much the height, although I might have issues with the height. It's like the bulk of the whole thing. Like it's not broken up at all. Like the building doesn't go in and out. It's just like an entire, feels like a whole block. And then this was kind of mentioned too, but I think that there aren't enough entries. Like I think, you can walk around the whole thing and there's not enough activity. So I had suggested before that I would like to see residential entries. So can you go to that floor plan again? The first floor. So like that one, where it says restaurant at the top, like I think that would make sense for residential entries, or more doors, and then have the restaurant be down at the bottom facing the view, and that would help activate a lot of that, because otherwise there's just not a lot of it's kind of like eyes on the street, but also like people coming in and out. Like they're not really coming in and out along most of the perimeter. Whereas if that was an old like a historic building, there would have been a lot of entries, like a lot of different places to come in and out of.
You're right. I appreciate everything you're saying. If anybody's trying to count votes here, I agree with everything you're saying.
And then I also really don't like the top floor, but I said that before too. I don't like the design of it. I think it's super busy. It has 3 different materials. I don't like those chimneys. So if that was simplified, and yeah, I really don't like it. And maybe down a level. I'm conflicted about exactly how high I think it should be, but I think the fact that it's not broken up in terms of it being the whole block, and then with the doors and stuff, that makes it feel bigger to me. So I don't know if it had, like if it went in some spots, like for the entry, like a courtyard entry, or things to break up the bulk, I think would help. But otherwise, I think I agree with most of what you guys said already.
So the interesting about the residential that I've heard you and Maureen say, and I haven't disagreed with you, but in some ways having the residential facing is fine, but having the resident entries to each unit, is more of what's over on the other side of the common versus what is over in this area. And it doesn't, to me, it doesn't fit here. So, because it's also a very active space in a lot of ways as well, with the path and everything. So so I don't know, when you say that, I always am like, but then but I do understand what you're saying about the eyes on the street. If the residents in the comment said, get the restaurant out to the waterway, on the water, and the other side where the residential entrance is, move the resident entrance more to the front of the building. And then what you guys are saying is put some of the units on the first floor, but also their entrances on the first floor, like their main entrance. Are you talking about having like patio doors, or what? Can you clarify what you're seeing there?
I'm picturing almost like brownstones, which is the way they were talking about the massing, like townhome rhythm. Like I'm thinking of this building in Kendall near my old office, and it was pretty big, but there were entry doors, I don't know, every little way, and it made it feel a lot more manageable. And also it's helpful for safety, because otherwise you don't want to walk around a lot of the parts of this building because there's just not enough activity. Whereas if this was a historic building, there would be a lot of different activity points.
Okay.
So
Does that make sense? Like coming in and out?
Yeah,
people?
well, if you come in at different points and you need elevators at those points, so if you treat it like a historical building, there's code now, so you have to have elevators at all those entrance points.
Or they'd be first floor units.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, they'd enter directly into the unit.
One of the broad general, and I know it's where Heather Hannon's coming from. I read all this planning stuff too. One of the things is just more doors. It's not just active windows, eyes on the street, but also that just more doors makes a more vibrant building. And it also, there's something, again, for the pedestrian environment, that the more doors feels better. It actually, well, I'll forget that. A different concept is across the street. And this slide bothers me a bit, but okay, because we know that the bank is a real little building, and we know that the building on the left side is quite large. So there's a distortion going on here that's odd. But anyway, the building on the right, it was actually encapsulated. That always was a little, it's sort of like a little 3-decker originally. It had shingles on it, but it was, that building's going to come down eventually. So if we start, I think we need to get back to, as you said, Heather von Meering earlier, we need to look to get the CBD again. We've learned a few things along the way. And I think the idea of building out on that building on the right, next where the stucco is right now, if it's redeveloped, it could be going residential as well. And then the Jenks lot has been discussed time and again as to whether the town would want to redevelop it. And so we could actually end up creating a residential corridor as we try to concentrate our retail at the point where maybe Scotty's Insurance is right now. The banks sort of begin, it's not active retail. Let's say where the Pondview Florist is, or whatever the florist is called now, and then move the retail, concentrate the retail. Retail's just really tough in the town. And I think if we envision residential, we should be thinking of how future development will follow.
So just so clarity, if you want residential there. The other option that we discussed in this whole conversation is as well, small, like some of the medical units and stuff that we're losing to be put on that in that first floor, which also could be their independent points of entry.
But that's office, Heather, and what they do is they draw the blinds. It's terrible, and it's also at fairly high traffic.
Well,
So it
But
adds traffic.
it adds traffic, but it adds
I
life as well, though.
Yeah, look, can I put in a cautionary note about having residential on the first floor? If you go on North Main Street, and I don't know what it's called anymore, there's the building next to the Lane Funeral Home. It's a brick building.
Yeah.
Yeah. The one
That,
across from Burger King.
yes,
Yeah.
that building has first floor residential. Those shades are always drawn because there is absolutely no privacy. So in my picture of a brownstone, and maybe I just don't know much about them, is I always see a flight of stairs going up so that the first floor is raised above ground level. And if there is a lower, apartment below, it's below ground level. So at ground level, you're not actually looking into anyone's windows. So I really think, I think that that building on North Main Street is really subpar residential, because those people have zero privacy unless they draw their shades. And I really wouldn't like to see that in the CBD. I think it would be a disservice to the people living there.
Yeah, that's a good point. And sometimes the spaces that you would walk down to are commercial.
Yeah. So I'm thinking of, the few times I've been to DC and Baltimore, where there's a lot of all these, the old brownstones, there's always this up-down feeling to them, even in parts of Boston, but there's never really a lot just at ground floor, or ground level, I should say.
Yeah, and the ones I'm picturing all go up as well.
Yeah, so I don't know if that's possible. I don't know, but I like the idea of a much more active front with more doors. I think that does liven things up, but I think we have to be cautious about how it's done.
It also depends on the market too, as well as what the development team is able.
Well, that would be where I'm jumping in. The reality is what I'll call office space, not retail, but office space looks for really inexpensive space. And where they've landed, for example, they're in the upper story of the Locatelli building, and even then they don't fill it. There's actually not that much demand.
Well, I think, do you guys all feel, I know Betsy hasn't talked yet, but do you feel that at this point they have a lot of ideas to work with to liven that first floor? There's many different avenues that were brought up of ways to do that. And they can look at what they're interested in doing, from bringing the recreational up to the top floor, inside the roof line, bringing higher and down low, whatever. There's putting in smaller businesses. There's a lot of ideas thrown out. I think we all are kind of feeling that they're all kind of generally acceptable, depending on how much it livens and how it moves the perimeter of the building, the energy that moves through it.
Yeah. I agree. I just don't, the 800-pound elephant in the room is really how many stories.
And I think, we've kind of all hit it on the head a little bit.
Well, I think it's three. It's going to be the four. Let's see, 1, 2. Yeah, it's the 3.5-story building, and the half is really can be fairly substantial. I just don't want to lose Heather Hannon's point that it's very massive right now. So it's we've got to somehow the block has to be broken up. It's
in some way,
yeah, like it could be an I-shaped building or something, like where you just have some breaks.
So I just want to chime in and say, for me, 3.5 stories is that's not where I'm coming in. I'm okay with the taller building. So
are you saying the 5 stories as it's drawn?
Not as it's drawn, but I am, again, for me, what's important is that if they come forward with a strong argument for why they need to go with the PUD route, and then I will evaluate the size of the building based on how much they're willing to put into the inclusionary housing. I mean, that's
Yeah.
the balance for me. If they can't,
Yeah.
if they don't come up with a strong argument, then they don't get the bigger building. If they do come up with a strong argument and they come up with a building which I can understand why people dislike the top floor. It's a design issue, but that's my balance. Is they got to prove that they deserve the PUD.
Mhm.
Well, I want to just jump in on that because even if there's, well, let me back up. It will be, I think, really hard to evaluate what the PUD criteria actually mean in terms of range. It's pretty loose in terms of price point that that wording is used and so on. But at the end of the day, we're going to be seeing luxury units, and if we're building a bunch of luxury units, we're really not addressing affordable housing in the center. And this is not really the place where we're going to get a large number, what really is going to move the needle on the affordable housing 40B goal. So at the end, we're building something on a really gorgeous site, and it's a gateway into the town center. This slide certainly suggests for all of us how it feels when you come out of off 93, for example, and come into the town. And I feel as if we don't want we want a building that fits with what's on the right. This slide is misleading on that, and I know it was not deliberate. I know it was there is some perspective going on here that makes some sense, but the building on the left is way out of scale with the buildings that exist on the right. And I think at the end of the day, we're going to want to, even if it's going to be a 3.5-story building with a pretty substantial half story, it's still going to it's a lot of building, and we've got to get something attractive out of it.
Well, I completely agree. It needs to be attractive. I don't think that we should. I am concerned that if we think that we're never going to get affordable housing in the center, we will never get affordable housing. And yes, there will be some luxury units, but I think that affordable housing deserves to be in the center. And so saying that we will solve our affordable housing problem by putting it elsewhere in town, I think is essentially saying that the people who need affordable housing don't deserve to be downtown. I know that's not what you're saying, Maureen, but that's the impression that we get, is if we're saying we can build the large things and we're going to get to our massive number of housing by putting it in other parts of the town because it's okay to put it there, but it's not okay to put it in the CBD.
So if
I think there's an equity issue.
You're going to be looking outside of the zoning because it's open. It's really it's up to the board to determine that. So then you're going to have to determine what is the price and what's the size, how many bathrooms, what's going on for the number of units that you would want, and what's your number. To me, it's just that I just don't even want to try. But I don't know what I was looking recently with this same question. I mean, it was this question. It was about Winchester and about this site. And I was thinking, well, what are affordable units if that's what we're trying to gain in this development? And so I'm looking at the price of units in places like Stoneham and places like Medford, right next door. And what do you think you're going to be paying?
You know, that's really a question for the developers. If we require them to put in more affordable units because that's what we want, then they will have to come and tell us what they can do. We know what we know what the we got the specs, what they're supposed to be affordable for, the 80 to, the workplace housing and also the stuff they would end up on the SHI. I don't know what they could be priced at, and I don't know what their profit margins are, because we won't see their.
We're allowed to ask the prices. That's part of.
Sure, but we can ask the prices. I don't know how far we can push them on this, but it's just where do we stand as a board? If we want to keep development, there's a whole bunch of factors that go in there, and I really feel strongly that we need to put affordable housing everywhere in town, and just so that we don't create silos. We don't want to just say,
So if I agree with you, I would say an affordable unit should be around $500,000. And if we look at what's going up on Elmwood and for sale there, the smallest units are just a hair under $1 million. So, or 100, yeah. So what's the difference between a $500,000 unit, which I think is affordable and would be a range of price points? How many $500,000 units would we expect? And is that what the developers want to deliver? And I would guess that's going to be the end of the discussion.
well, then they don't get the PUD. I mean, that's as far as I'm concerned, is if they don't come up with more than 15% total number of units, and they don't come up significantly more than that, then they haven't met the requirement for the PUD.
And then the alternative is to go back to the special permit.
And that's where I was coming in, because at this site, it is an amazing site. It's
Right.
spectacular location. You're far enough away from the train. You have the water. You have walkability. You have so many things going for you in this site, that this site, that's why in the last meeting I said go for the high end, because the loss that they're going to get if they go for a PUD, the loss they're going to get on those units versus if they went for full market rate, it doesn't, it's a huge difference. And it's a huge financial difference for them. And that's where I was coming in, because you could get so much more money for them and then go for the lower height building. That's where I was coming in, but they may have a different number that are working behind the scenes that, I don't have, and are doing different things. And but that's where I was coming in with it. It'd be better to have all of them except for the 15 be high end, and go for it. Go for the
It's
goal.
an analysis, and you're right, Heather. I totally agree. I mean, that's my analysis.
I mean, if you could have any of those units that face the water, right, on two sides, I mean, they're worth a lot of money.
Right.
So,
Right. Exactly.
so am I, the ones that face, and then on top of it, when you're going into the units, and you're doing more than the 10 and 5, they also have to be evenly dispersed.
Right.
Right. So you can't just put them all on the side, that faces the little insurance building. They have to be evenly dispersed throughout the building. So that's why but they may have different numbers running in the background. And I think we've given them pretty clear of where we're coming from and how to go forward. And it's interesting, because the more we go through this, the more and more residents are getting involved. And it's been interesting.
Well, speaking of voices, Betsy, you've been awfully quiet.
Excuse me. What did I had the little gypsy there saying you are now unmuted, and I didn't hear the end of what you were saying.
Oh, I just was wondering. We haven't heard from you yet. I was hoping that we would hear from you.
Oh, well, I've been chiming in here from time to time. No, I think that the affordability is very, very important, and I think the more that we can fit in with that, while at the same time knowing that we have to have something that is going to be attractive at a certain price point to bring in the revenue that is going to be able to sort of offset. It's just one of those situations where I think we're laying it out properly in terms of our goals and so forth and what we want to see. But it's always going to be a little bit of a tap dance with the developers. I think that's going to be inevitable. Hello?
Yes, I agree.
Agree as well. I think let's move on to the next one. I think, does the board feel like we kind of came to kind of a general overview, consensus, concept, ideas that are pretty clear? I don't think any of us were like, I disagree with you, or I'm interpreting the code differently, or any of that going on. I actually am very excited about this project still. I'm very hopeful for it.
Oh yeah.
And just, it's hard because in this situation, you're always, you always have to point out the negatives, but there are so many positives on this project that I don't want to also be discouraging either. But we have to go by the zoning. So let's go on to 654 Main Street. I think overall as a board, we came to a pretty good consensus on this. I don't think there's anything that we disagreed on, but why don't we kind of quickly go through what each person would like to see as a big concept. Because I know we had little things like you need to fix this window, or there's this in the presentation, and we don't need to go through that now because that's just tweaking here and there. But on a general concept, I am happy to start on this one, is that the final story needs to be addressed with it. That was my big, let's go to the elevation. Is that final story just needed to be addressed and dealt with. I would love to see that story as a mansard with some voids in it, so the roof actually comes down to the parapet. So it reads shorter, but design-wise, I don't know. I haven't even thought about how to sketch up, but that's where I'm at. That's my big issue with this one site. Anyone else want to go? We'll kind of balance it out as we go.
Yeah, I agree with that because it looks kind of like it's wearing a hat.
Looks like it wants to be stepped on. It looks like a Mario, like a Super Mario. My kids have been playing too much, but like where you want to push down to get the extra points.
I luckily have never played Super Mario. I agree. I mean, I think that the overwhelming number of comments about the roof was that it read too tall. I do have another comment. I mean, I don't have a problem with the height of the building except for that roof. I think 4 stories fits in. It's comparable in size to the condos to the right as we look at this image. What I am concerned about is more the usability of the open space behind the 61 Vine building, and whether that's going to be for residents, is it going to be for commercial use? I think there's a confusion about how that space will be used, and I would presume it would be for residents, but it's right next to the commercial space. Brian, can you move to it's like an overview of the courtyard in the back? I mean, I like what they're doing with 61 Vine. It's always going to be a little dwarfed by the building. Yeah,
excuse me.
Yeah, so I don't know how that space is going to be used. I mean, it could be part of the commercial space. I mean, if the residents are going to use that, do they really want to have plate glass windows from all the people in the businesses staring at them in their private secluded garden? So I'm confused about how, that's my biggest concern about the project, other than those strange things popping out of the roofs that we discussed. That's it for me.
Maureen, do you want to go?
Sure. Well, I'll stay with this one first. I actually got a phone call after this meeting, and I was advised this is the big one, the elevator lift. And actually we got somebody who wrote us a letter as well. So some of you have seen that. The elevator lift is a question. From our perspective, it might be great. It gets rid of a problem, which is a ramp. But with a car lift, there is the question of what happens. First of all, the letter that we received raised the question about the fees that will be thrown off onto the residents after the developer's gone. And that's a question. But even more urgent and more concerning for our board, it was pointed out to me that when these lifts go in, and they do go in the city, what happens is the residents figure they've got to get the car out of there. And so they get the car out and they park it on the street through the day. So it's available when they need it. So that the impact of having this lift approach as opposed to a ramp is that there will be cars thrown onto the street where it's already really congested. So I think we're going to have, I think we owe it to ourselves to get, maybe that has to be peer review and find out what the experts say, but that's somebody who had experience with it and said, this is a real concern, watch it. So that's the analysis on the car lift. The roof, everybody agrees that roof, that top story needs a lot of work. The fenestration, the vertical fenestration on the main elevation,
Yeah.
it doesn't, it needs, I guess Dennis Carlone would say, it needs work. The corners are kind of this wraparound corner thing, wraparound windows. I guess I'd rather see some solid there. We're still trying to do the, I don't know, mid 20th century thing where we kind of break up the masses the way the architects would have said it then. It needs, I think, well, I'll leave it at that. Those are the big ideas. Oh, I did want to say about the house. I'm delighted to see the house. Want to make sure that I'm really happy about that. I do question the idea that the house has all these doors opening out of the back. Just if that we probably will eventually, yeah, and it's great on the front, but on the back it's just all opened up. And I think for the use of the house, that even I don't know, are we putting a gym in this building? I can't imagine, but if it's going to be like rooms where somebody, I understand there are a bunch of one bedrooms. I was delighted to hear that. If somebody's got a 1-bedroom unit, then maybe somebody wants to come over here to do, if they're working remotely, just to get out of a small unit and have another place to go. I space could use, as Heather mentioned on the other building, as a function space, party space, but you don't need all those doors opening out the back. I just think it would be much more comfortable inside if one pair of French doors might be fine, but after that, let's enclose the back of the building.
So Maureen, I'm wondering if in response to the concerns about the parking, I know that I believe we don't have much permit parking in town, but would an institution of permit parking in this area help alleviate that? And I know we'd also discussed maybe turning Elmwood into a 2-way right at Main Street to allow people to enter the garage from Main Street rather than driving all the way around Elmwood. But maybe if we looked at how we can ensure that the side streets aren't overloaded with cars, that might help.
So I think the traffic is going to get dealt with peer review. I said that when this goes through, peer review is needed for traffic. Regardless of what is proposed, traffic is going to have to be analyzed. I do have clients, a couple of them, who have lifts, and the concerns are always there, but they don't have the problems. And they actually prefer to keep it there inside the building because they don't want to go outside into the weather. So they just kind of get into a rhythm. But the pure traffic review would also analyze that, what happens with those, how that impacts the street. Maureen, I disagree on the back. If they're however they're using that building, the historical building, if they're using it for a function space for all the residents, and they have the glass doors in the back that open to the courtyard, it makes it really an indoor-outdoor space. So it brings both together. And I think Dia, because of the height of that patio back there, you actually don't have windows into the retail.
Okay.
It's because if you look at the slope, you can't get windows on that back. But they are probably punctuating it, and why you're seeing some of the indentations in the plan. But I think it's actually kind of clever to put the glass onto a patio on the back of that house to create an indoor-outdoor.
But the problem is, again, just, I don't want to tell war stories, but when I'm out of, I don't want to go too far on this, but the winter is very long, and the warm weather season, think about the water over on Thompson Street, I don't know, they just changed their name, but anyway, the restaurant, it's a very short season, and those spaces could be used during the winter season, and it's leaky. There are also security issues if it's not occupied space. It just would be better to one pair of French doors is plenty to deal with in terms of security.
Yeah, I guess I've been in two places where they've had essentially wall-to-wall French doors. One was at a apartment complex. Oh gosh, I don't know, further out west. It was in a function space for the building, and it overlooked a golf course, and it was gorgeous because you got all of the light. It really livened up that space. So I am actually a fan of the extra doors and the security. I guess that's an issue, but you know, one door or five doors, I don't know. I like the idea of having that. I can see that as a really wonderful function space. So I guess it's up to the it's up to the developer.
And the developer has to install them correctly so they don't leak. That
Oh yeah, yeah,
probably
yeah. Obviously.
so yeah. Okay, so Maureen, your comment about the solid masses at the corners. There's a perspective coming down Main Street looking at the building with the liquor building on your left that shows that void in that corner, which I didn't mention, but if you mentioned that you'd like to see that, I can not that one, the other angle. Keep going. Keep going. It's where you look down from here. Keep going. Right there. That's where the corner drives me nuts.
Could you zoom in on that, please, Brian?
That's a good example of why Maureen is saying get massing at the corner.
Yeah.
Because it's that is a very, very strange corner right there.
Because it kind of looks like the building's about to fall over and you've got stilts holding it up.
Yeah, it just and then you have the different planes moving in and out, so nothing is lining up in perspective as well, all the way up. So the corners are off to the right, and then the windows are off to the left, and then you have the overhang, and then you have everything's not, and that's where if you put massing at that actual corner, that would take care of that. But that's so there's that. In top story, we all agree, work on the private space in the back of the house, if it's private or if it's public, and how address that. There just also wasn't any perspectives or anything dealt with that at this time. And then the traffic review and the lift. I personally, I think we're going to disagree on this. I am fine with that lift. The site is so complicated, you can't actually get a ramp in there unless we take the historical house out. There has to be compromises. There have to be, with the site, with the way it is and how difficult the site is to work, the lift actually has to go in to make it work as a site to get more stories in it, to get the movement through it and keep the house. So I think the other thing we really need to look at, and that's more on us and is the traffic, and work with the select board also, because regardless of these two projects that are Elmwood, which is already in this one being proposed, Vine needs their parking addressed. Vine and Elmwood need to get their parking addressed, and how they're going to deal with it, and the select board needs to be brought in on that conversation. Because it's been a problem for years, and we can't halt everyone from doing anything with their sites because of parking. It needs to get done with. So it's actually something we should probably move, regardless of whether an application's in or not, to the select board, so you have them start doing a review of that area and figure out how to deal with it, whether Elmwood and Vine are all permit parking for residents only, or how we deal with it. I don't know. It's just, I just throwing that out there, but it needs to get dealt with.
So, I've been looking at this corner, and I've just been thinking about the building where Winchester Pharmacy is at, and it has that same sort of cutaway at the first floor, so you get that alcove. Why does that building not look unbalanced?
Because there's massing all the way up that's consistent.
Okay.
Thank you.
So you have the cutout on the bottom, but the massings above is all equal.
Okay.
And then also at the corner, you have the piers that support the Winchester drug, pediment, but it's like a pediment, but all the trim work, that means they're equal distant from that corner. So right now you have a pier that's kind of, let's say it's like 4 feet from the corner, and then the other one is like 15 feet from the corner. So it's not equal spaced also. So you feel that the left is heavier and doesn't have the supports as the right has. It's just an optical illusion of supports.
Okay. So if you just, you know, one thing would be to move that pier to just to the corner, and that would make it seem a little better.
It would be either to put it at the corner or put a second pier by the handrail where the woman, or the drawing is some individual is standing right there. So they're equal distant. It could be to move the windows so they're actually in line at the surface, not set back. There's all different ways to play with it.
Okay, yeah, I don't want to lose that opening at the bottom, because I think it does make the building a little more interesting. So.
Yeah, it does make it interesting. So they could add a second pier. There's all different ways they could address that corner, but really it's above it.
Okay.
If they could line that up, it'd feel a little bit. Yeah. Anyway, there's options they can do, but that it's just an awkward feeling.
Okie dokie.
Okay. All right. So that's pretty much, we're all pretty much consistent on that. Solid mass at the corner,
I think so.
top of the story, private space in the back, and address the traffic.
Yep, and yeah, because I'm not hearing anything I disagree with. So
thank you, Betsy. All
You're
right.
welcome.
Heather, you all good?
Yep.
You've been quiet too. Okay. You ready to move on? Do we want to approve the meeting minutes, or do we want to? We're kind of running late on time.
I think we have to, but they were fine. They were great. So.
Yeah, we only scheduled 5 minutes for this, so I think we should be.
So this was just a quick background. This was the first one that Suzanne Gill had done. So she's obviously willing to make any changes necessary. She gave it to me. I edited it very slightly, just, like names that I knew were spelled incorrect, that kind of stuff.
Right.
So I did review it, and that was what I, so she finished it yesterday, and then I edited it and sent it along.
Yeah, my only real comment on there for an edit would be to, she uses first names a lot when she talks about the board. And just
that's because she knows us all.
That's true, but for posterity who really, they probably want to just have it as we do, the standard way is a little more formal, so that it's not our first name.
Mr. Jarius, and for example, and
you could just say Jarius. I don't know who Mr. Jarius is.
Oh, okay.
Oh, is that right?
So I'm going to make a motion to approve the minutes. I think going forward, it's fine if Dieb's, that's fine. But I'm going to make.
I can make those edits and get them book ready.
Then
it also helps between Heather and I.
Yes, it's
very clear the difference between Heather Von.
That's a good point. Yeah.
I can do that.
Just replace Heather Hannon with Violet.
I love that.
But that doesn't work unless there's a picture to see who's wearing what.
Have you got a motion, Heather?
Yeah, so second.
Wait, who was the motion? Was Maureen?
Yes.
All right, motion Maureen, second.
Taking a vote on these, you're absent.
Yeah.
Oh,
what?
Yeah, Betsy. Yeah, I don't think you can.
You're absent. So
on this one, this was a September 17th one.
Okay.
Okay.
I will second it.
So second, Jarius, and it would be as amended for, and I will, for town planner will update as amended.
Thank you. And all those in favor, we need to do a roll call.
Jarius says aye.
Diab? Maureen?
Aye.
Betsy, are you abstaining?
Yes.
Okay. And Heather Von Mering, aye. 401. Meeting minutes are approved.
I was wondering if Brian has any update on the new recording secretary.
So HR, so I've sent the necessary forms to HR, which formally hires her. And we are waiting for her to essentially get on the payroll. I'm hoping that by next Tuesday, the 26th, that she will be able to take those minutes.
Oh, good.
Suzanne going to continue to help to get us
She,
caught up?
yep, exactly. So she's going to do that, and then once we get the recording secretary on board, we'll kind of make a decision on whether we will give all of those meetings to her to work on or continue with Suzanne.
Well, split them because
Yeah,
I think
I mean most likely it will probably get split between the three of us.
yeah.
But Suzanne Gill is she has all the DVDs right now, and she's slowly going through those, and those I will pick those up and give portions of those to the new recording secretary.
Oh, good.
All right. So our next meeting is May 26th.
Yeah, so very, very quick, and because I know it's late, but I wanted to, so this is, the Concom has something at 7:30, the continuation of a hearing. So they suggested we come from 8 to 9. We will be reviewing a petition during this, so I'm guessing that, or I'm hoping that we can start a petition, a review of a petition at 7:30. We would still have our own meeting. It's starting at 7:30 next week on the 26th. We would get through that petition as much as we could. We would join Concom from 8 to 9. And then if we need to come back to our own meeting to finish anything, potentially voting in articles, for example, after we get the budget, we can do a quick vote there. So the hope is that we will be done by, maybe 9:30, something like that, but we'll start at 7:30 with us.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
That was it. So, Heather, I think you'll entertain a motion to.
I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved.
All right.
10:22.
All right. A meeting adjourned at 10:22.
I
Thank you
think we
very
got
much,
everybody
everyone.
in there.
Thank you for everyone who hung in there on Zoom with us. And we'll be back next Tuesday.
Okay.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
See you then.
Good evening.